First of all, good morning, everybody. And just a reminder, the reason why we're doing this is because it's my way of showing honor and respect to my parents of blessed memory, Liba Bas Miriam and Avram Dov Ben Yehoshua, maybe for merit and elevation for their souls. Today is actually New Year's. It's the first of all, it's Chav Dalet Teves in Hebrew, 24th day of Teves. It's a very special day in the Chabad calendar. It's the yahrzeit of the first Rabbi of Chabad, the first Schneerson, so to speak, who started the movement. And it's not so much of a movement as much as a way of life, which has been embraced by over the generations, probably over 1 million people, certainly, but hundreds of thousands of people, even today, have been profoundly affected by the teachings of the Alter Rebbe through his magnum opus, the Tanya, and so on. So today's his yahrzeit, so there's a very good spiritual energy in the room. It's also, as I mentioned, the yahrzeit of my dad, but it's also in the secular calendar. It's actually January 1st. It's New Year's. And this is always a constant ongoing debate. Do Jews celebrate New Year? But essentially, whenever there's an opportunity to wish blessings, Jews capitalize on it. And being that there's a teaching from the Rebbe related in the name of Rabbi Levi Yitzchak of Berditchev, and that is that the Almighty God, who created the nations of the world, counts according to their registrar as well. In other words, when it comes January 1st, the beginning of a new year, in the heavenly court, they take that into account. So as a result, this Happy New Year, which is sort of an affirmation and a blessing, so certainly it's an opportune time to wish us all a very happy upcoming year, a year filled with a lot of blessings. There's also a charming Hasidic anecdote which says that when Hashem gives us, He writes down that we're all going to have a good year on Rosh Hashanah, what happens is that the prosecuting angel says to God, I don't know why you're giving them a good year. They're just acting nice because it's the new year. But just wait until after the new year, you'll see that they don't deserve the blessings. So what happens is Hashem waits with some of those blessings. When it comes the secular new year, and there's a lot of partying out there, not too much holiness though, so then in heaven they say, you said that everyone on the new year is good. Well, take a look. Not everyone on the new year is good. Well, if that's the case, when the Jewish people came on Rosh Hashanah, which is a new year, and they blew their shofar and they prayed, they certainly deserved goodness, and indeed, some of the blessings that were already told for us on Rosh Hashanah are reaffirmed and perhaps even strengthened on the secular New Year. So, Happy New Year to everyone. May Hashem bless us all with a year of good health and a lot of success and a lot of happiness.
Amen.
Okay, today's topic is the topic of forgiveness, and I have for you two sheets. The first sheet is actually from the Mayo Clinic, so it's not coming from a Jewish source at all. And the second one are some sources from the Jewish traditions. Now, let me first tell you what we hope to accomplish today. I'd like to talk about forgiveness in terms of Jewish law, and to talk about forgiveness in terms of not only Jewish law, but maybe Jewish ethics or Jewish morality. It is a very, very broad subject because it touches on fundamental feelings of a human being. And anytime we talk about an emotional state of a human being, it's complex, sometimes confusing. I would argue that it's easier to understand a person's thinking than it is to understand a person's feeling. So, like, why are you feeling down? Why are you feeling up? Why did you interpret my words this way? You know, people are complex. They have many when it comes to emotions. So, being that forgiveness is tied deeply into the emotional state of a person, it's a very broad subject, and today we're just going to really touch upon it. I would also suggest now, and perhaps repeat it at the end, the reason why forgiveness is a very, very challenging concept for most people, men and women, is for the reason that forgiveness is clearly connected to a divine aspect of a human being. All of us understand that there are parts of our personality which can be compared to an animal. So there's the need of food and shelter, right? A certain amount of recreation or leisure. And there are times which we associate more with the spiritual, the non-material, the angelic. Forgiveness actually touches upon not only the angel part of a person, I'm using that loosely, but really on the very divinity. So with that with that in mind, that this is what we're going to be talking about, let's first start with, if you look at the paper, you will see forgiveness is good for your health. Okay, and I'll just read what they wrote because I have nothing to add. In healthier relationships, it helps you mentally, it lowers anxiety and hostility, you have lower blood pressure, you're not going to get as depressed, you get stronger, you have more self-esteem, all of these wonderful qualities. So if it makes so much sense in a physical sense, in other words, all of us understand that forgiveness brings to true health benefits. Why are so many people who are into health and trying to have a healthy diet and do a certain amount of exercise and so on and so forth, why wouldn't they embrace the concept of forgiveness? Forgiveness should really be one of the first things you should do for your health. Even before you necessarily lose weight, learn how to lose grudges. If you can lose grudges, you'll be healthy. And then we can talk about losing weight. What happens if you don't, right? What happens if you don't forgive? Take a look what happens. You get angry, you get bitter, you don't appreciate the present. It's an amazing concept because you have this in your heart. Sometimes what could be and should be most enjoyable is not. And indeed, for those that are spiritually attuned, when they cannot forgive or do not forgive, their trajectory is off. They don't feel spiritually the way they should feel. So we know the benefits of forgiveness just on a physical sense is good. And we know on the negative of that is bad. So why is it so difficult and what does it mean? So let's first start with an interesting observation. In the Jewish way of serving God begins with morning prayer. And actually in Jewish law you're supposed to do prayer before you get involved with work and so on. How does Jewish prayer begin? If you open up the prayer book, you will see it begins with a declaration. I hereby accept upon myself the mitzvah of loving a fellow Jew like myself. So it's an affirmation, it's a statement that before I begin praying for myself, or before I even begin my own personal spiritual journey upwards, I'm accepting upon myself the mitzvah to love a fellow Jew. Why that is so important is going to be the subject of another lecture. But that's just the fact. That's how we begin the day. How do we end the day? With the prayer you say before retiring, before you lay down. And this is an amazing prayer. Master of the universe, I hereby forgive anyone who has angered me, vexed me, sinned against me, whether it be physically, financially, whether accidentally, intentionally, inadvertently, deliberately, whether he did it through speech, whether he did it through deed, whether in this incarnation or a different one. What I want is that no Israelite should be punished on my account. Imagine, you end the day with forgiveness. And to who? To everybody. There's no exceptions to the rule. There's not, I hereby forgive everyone except for Uncle Bob, who did not show up on my birthday. There's no such thing. In fact, you not only include all the people you know now, but if there's some mystical adverse a connection that someone hurt you in a different, you're forgiving him as well. Why do we say that? So we begin the day with loving a fellow Jew. We end the day not only loving a fellow Jew, but actually demonstrating our, if you love someone, almost always forgiveness is a given. It's very hard to love someone and not forgive that person. So actually the demonstration of loving a fellow Jew is, at the end of the day, you're forgiving people. Why should you forgive the people? Why? On a practical level, there's, if you read in between the lines, the prayer is telling you, you're not going to have a good night's sleep if you go to bed not forgiving a person. Now, I'm saying that with a half smile, because why wouldn't you have a good sleep? It's a good feeling getting angry. It's a good feeling knowing that you're superior than so-and-so. Why is it that you can't go to bed? And here it's very interesting. It would seem that it's connected to your soul itself. In the mystical tradition, as well as quoted indirectly in Jewish law, when you go to bed, your neshama goes up to heaven. Your neshama will not find a peacefulness in heaven to be recharged properly if it's coming up with hatred or a grudge against someone else. That's how strong forgiveness is. It's not only that it's good for your body, but it's actually necessary for your soul. But why is it necessary for your soul? So let us begin. We'll start off with a very basic question. Are we commanded, is there a mitzvah that tells us you are obligated as a Jew to forgive your fellow Jew? I could say the word fellow man, but I'd like to keep it really within the fold primarily, because it makes it much clearer. Are you obligated to forgive a brother or a sister who's biologically your brother or sister, or your parents who are genetically you? And in general, all of us Jewish people are Am Echad, we're one nation, we're one people, we're one family. Are you obligated? Is there such a commandment? So as far as I know, from my understanding, there is no commandment in the Torah that says you are obligated to forgive. Fascinating, however, is that when you look in the laws of Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement, what takes place on the Day of Atonement? Hashem forgives us, right? So now we're talking about how does one prepare and how does one act appropriately towards the day when God will forgive you, and comes in chapter 606 in Shulchan Aruch. A human being, a fellow Jew, is obligated to ask for forgiveness. Again, let me make this very clear. You are not obligated to forgive. There is an obligation for someone who needs forgiveness to ask for it. Once that happens, we have now a new setting. Someone is asking me for forgiveness. Should I respond? Now that's very different than this statement that I mentioned from the Siddur, page 141 of the Chabad Siddur. Every night we forgive everyone. And clearly the way we forgive at night before going to bed is not as powerful or does not do the same effect as before Yom Kippur. The day that you're going to ask God to forgive you, where you now come out and you go to your neighbor, or perhaps a loved one, could be a spouse as well, and ask forgiveness. If you do not ask forgiveness, you will not receive it, because they're not obligated to forgive anyone. But when approached, then it is proper and indeed, halachically speaking, obligated. What mitzvot, what divine commandments are touched when a person forgives? So I'll share with you some very obvious. Number one, there is a commandment to actually follow in the path of God. One of the first things that we find in the Torah itself is God forgiving. Whether it be Adam and Chava, whether it be Cain who kills his brother, whether it be later on they worship an idol, God forgives. There is a positive biblical commandment. One of the 613 commandments is, After the Lord your God you shall go, you shall follow. So if you want to imitate God, not if you want, you're obligated to imitate God. One of the ways you imitate God is by forgiving. So there's no commandment to forgive a person, but there is a commandment to be like Hashem, who forgives. There's another thing which is very clearly connected. There's a positive commandment to love your fellow Jew as yourself. We forgive ourselves constantly. We make mistakes, sometimes deliberately. We make a fool of ourselves. Sometimes we deliberately damage, and then we forgive ourselves. In fact, those that don't know how to forgive themselves walk around with a stone on their back, and they often need professional guidance in how to learn how to forgive yourself and go on. So certainly if you love your neighbor, forgiveness will be one of the ways you do it. So we have already 2 mitzvahs. Then we also have some negative commandments. There is a sin to hate your brother in your heart. And I'm going to talk a lot about this particular concept. But if you forgive, you will remove hatred in your heart. If you do not forgive, then there will remain a hatred in your heart, and you are violating a commandment. Again, there is no commandment to forgive. There is an obligation on a person to ask you for forgiveness, and then if they do it sincerely, you should respond. But there is a sin to hate a person. That's a sin. So forgiveness is connected to going after God, loving a fellow Jew. It's connected to, it is forbidden to hate your neighbor in your heart. It's also forbidden to harbor a grudge, and certainly to take revenge. Now a person will say, I'm not taking revenge. I just don't want to forgive this person. My brother took advantage of me. We were partners. He stole from me. I didn't even look because I trusted him. He was my older brother. I will never forgive him. I'm not going to his bar mitzvahs. I'm not going to his weddings. I don't want to. No, I'm not saying anything bad about him. I don't even tell my children about it. But I will not forgive him. What does that mean? You are harboring a grudge. Revenge means I will go to his bar mitzvah and make a scene. That's taking revenge. You understand? Revenge means I'm going to do some type of an action that's going to hurt him. That's revenge. Oh, I'm not going to do that, but I just going to... That's called harboring a grudge. So I already mentioned 4 biblical commandments. There's no commandment in the Torah. You will not find Hashem telling us you must forgive. But you will find Hashem saying, imitate me. You will find Hashem telling us, love your fellow Jew. You will find Hashem warning you, do not hate. And you will find Hashem telling us, do not have a grudge. Okay. It's interesting when you look in Maimonides, who talks about the 613 commandments. The mitzvah of he does not mention the mitzvah of forgiveness. It's not a commandment. But yet he describes how you should forgive in the section which talks about how you should be like God. And he actually gives 11 commandments which make a person very similar to God, not mentioning forgiveness. However, when you read the chapter, that is where he actually talks about the idea of forgiveness. Okay, let's go to the next step. A person is obligated to ask for forgiveness. Why? Why should you ask for forgiveness? Which is just another way of saying, why forgiveness? So first, let's take a step back for a moment and ask ourselves, what is forgiveness? What does actually forgiveness mean? Now, in your first sheet, it's actually quite good. It means you drop resentment. What does that mean? And the second question, which is not really a question as much as, we're thinking out loud together as a group. How does a person get to the level of forgiveness? So for one thing, what we would say is that forgiveness is connected to a bigger concept of believing in God. What does that mean, believing in God? Why is a person offended? In other words, what leads to the need for forgiveness? So of course there could be a financial loss and there could be an emotional loss. Okay? And they're both good reasons and they're both very painful. But let's put them both together for a moment and ask, it happened. Was it supposed to happen? A. B. If it wasn't supposed to happen, why did God allow it to happen? And then there's also, of course, the C. It happened. What should be the response to this? If a person has a very strong belief system and lives this belief system, he believes that nothing happens from God without it being orchestrated, directed by the Almighty God. If you don't believe that, you're going to find many things happening to you which will cause you to be upset in the lightest of way or to be crushed in the worst way. If you believe that there isn't anything that happens to you that is happening haphazardly, you will then find forgiveness a natural outflow of this belief system. Now, it's easy to talk because, I can't think of anyone that I have to forgive because I don't think anyone has ever hurt me. And that I say not because I'm trying to be cute, but because I truly feel it. What does that mean? In order to forgive, you have to first feel you're offended. You first have to be wounded. But if you look at yourself in a way where either you deserved it, you needed it, or the person that's doing it should not be held responsible. For example, there's so many examples, but for example, right? What happens if you're walking down the street and a 6-year-old runs over to you and he says something like, "You're a terrible man, you're a boogeyman, I hate you"? Most of us would not get terribly offended. Chances are, if we happen to know that this child has an abusive home, not only will we not get offended, but we might hug the child. We actually might see that statement as a plea for, I need a hug. Because my parents, I think, are monsters. So I hate you, you're my monster. And then you're the neighbor, you know what's going on, and you know what this child needs. It needs a hug, it needs a reassurance, it needs something. Offensive? No. Well, you're hurt? No. Actually, every parent in the world was the recipient of a child saying, I hate you, you're the worst mommy, you're the worst daddy, I never want to see you again. And it usually lasts between 45 seconds and a minute and a half. Occasionally, when they get older, it's a little bit more painful, it stays longer. But clearly, we look at the child and we say they're immature. They're very frustrated. Bubala is probably hungry. Bubala had a bad day. Bubala, in order to be wounded enough that you need to forgive, you have to hold yourself to begin with on a certain level. Let me share with you a Hasidic story, and then we'll continue on this vein. There's a commandment that says one should bless God for suffering the same way you would bless him for goodness, which is very, very demanding. Who doesn't want to get a candy from God, and who could appreciate a smack? Very few people. What does the Talmud mean? So someone came to the Maggid of Mezrich and asked for an interpretation, and he said, go to my student Reb Zusha. He's a learned man, he will be able to tell it to you. So the scholar comes to Reb Zusha and he says, I have a question in Talmud. So Reb Zusha, in his humility, says, why me? There's so much greater. He said, no, he told me to ask you the question. He said, okay, if my Rebbe said I should hear the question. The question I have is, if God gives you something which is uncomfortable, if he gives you suffering, how can you accept it with love? And Reb Zusha said, it's a good question. I don't know how to answer that question. But I'm very surprised that he sent you to me. The only one that can answer that question, how do you take suffering with love, if someone experienced suffering. But God has never made me suffer anything. So how can I answer? Now obviously Reb Zusha had suffered plenty, like every human being, in addition to which he was physically poverty-stricken. You wouldn't see him as an easy, having a life of ease. Yet he understood and was on a spiritual level, whatever God gives is what is good. I'm not suffering. As a result, he couldn't answer the question. In a similar way, the first thing that you actually have to often ask yourself is, not why is it so difficult to forgive, but who am I that I was so offended? What actually happened? What did they do so heinous? What was the great crime? I was wounded. What did they actually do? Am I really deserving? Do I really need all of that honor? So that's just something to keep in mind. That before you talk about even forgiveness, you have to ask yourself, not why should I forgive, but why is forgiveness necessary? That's a question. But let's go a little bit more deeper, and we will say, who are we kidding? There's plenty of, okay, maybe we're not tzaddikim, maybe we're not righteous, and therefore we deserve in our mind X, Y, and Z, and therefore when someone took that away, they made me feel inferior, they insulted me, or they showed that I don't care, they don't care about me, or worse than that, they actually caused the physical damage. I was offended, I am hurt, I am wounded. Why should I forgive? Well, the answer is you don't have to. Don't forgive. Walk around eating yourself up. That's the answer. It's not the answer. But I'm saying, Rabbi, why should I forgive? Don't. By all means, enjoy life with this acid eating away from you. You want to do that? That's fine. By the way, I can also tell you to start smoking, drinking, and eating cholesterol. And if that's not enough, don't do any extra. You understand? I'm being facetious, but if you understand that this is something that's eating you up, and then you ask the silly question of why should I forgive, it's eating you up. That's why you should forgive. Get rid of it. The whole question is sort of weird. Why should you forgive? Well, let's go back. I mentioned number one is you should forgive because you shouldn't have been insulted to begin with. Or, alternatively, you were insulted, you were hurt, but this is what Hashem wanted to happen to you. Now, do we have a model of this? I mean, I'm not speaking silly. Rabbi, you're just simply silly. What do you mean Hashem wanted this? We do have a model. The model is Joseph. And this is from the Alter Rebbe, as well as who knows how many other commentators. There was never a person as wounded as much as Yosef by his own family, who should have known better. They should have loved him, respected him as a brother, and if not as a brother, they should have loved and respected their father. And what they did was, when he was 17 years old, they tried to kill him. They sold him as a slave. For 22 years, this poor individual, I call him poor in the sense of everything was taken away from him. His family, his prestige, his honor, his dignity, everything. And when he sees his brothers, he excuses himself to them. Please don't be distressed because of me. It's an amazing statement. Don't be sad. You thought perhaps it was going to hurt me. You thought negative, but Hashem wanted it for the good. So I only see that what you did was good. What was good about it? Look where I am now. I'm a king. Would I ever been a king without you guys? Not only that, what do I want most in my life? To take care of my family. Would I be able to have taken care of my family if I would have been just one of you guys coming to a new country trying to buy food? Now I'm the king. I could honor my father. I could honor my brothers and sisters. I could feel good about... He's like, is he abnormal? Yes, he's not normal. Yosef is not acting in the natural way of things. But actually, Yosef is a tzaddik. He is a righteous person and understands that nothing could happen without God. And if that's the case, all of what I experienced was meant to be. And my job is to learn how to respond to that and to see, can I get stronger from it? Can I learn something from it? Too many times I meet people who tell me that they haven't spoken to a loved one. Usually it's siblings, but sometimes parents. I mean, it's like, I don't get it. Why? Why would you not talk? I can't, they did this and this to me. And I say, well, so what? and then I become insensitive and callous. No, Rabbi, you have no idea how much it hurt me. Okay, I got it. It hurt you. And have you ever had a cut before? It hurt. What happened? You healed. If you're still walking around with a cut, then it's going to get infected. It hurt. So heal yourself. One of the most interesting things about forgiveness is it's totally in our hands. Are you obligated? Why should I forgive that shmo? The answer is, you don't have to. But it's going to harm you. But you don't have to. But if that shmo, that person asks you for forgiveness, then what are you going to do? Not? What are you going to gain? The person humbled themselves enough to acknowledge they did something wrong. What more do you want? You want them to what? Die? You want them to be paralyzed? What do you really want? That's all you really want. To acknowledge that I hurt you. Okay, you hurt me. You acknowledge it. I want to let you know I've been walking around with this hurt for a long time, but I do forgive you. Let me go back for a second to talk about hatred. How do you define hatred? And this is really another lecture, if not more. What is hatred? There are many levels of hatred. Is there anyone in this room that hates someone? I don't know. I don't feel it in the room. That just means I don't have a good attendance, I take it. I can't think of someone that I hate. Hate is a strong emotion. But you know something? I'm going to give you a halachic definition, and then we're going to see how guilty I am as well as you. The sages tell us that one of the ways of defining an enemy is when a person has the opportunity to talk with this person, and 3 times, whether it be in, I'm not sure if it's the same day or over 3 times, they refuse to acknowledge them. Could you imagine? Again, 3 days you did not speak to someone you met in the elevator. In the past, perhaps you used to say good morning. Now you don't do that. In Jewish law, you're qualified as an enemy. And what? And nothing. Except in case, God forbid, you're involved in by mistake, running him over. In Jewish law, we would be suspicious that it was not an accident. You say, look, I've never hurt the person. I would save the person's life. Why are you accusing me of somehow subconsciously wanting his harm? All I did was I didn't speak to him. That's where it is. Why did you not speak to that person? I have nothing to say. Nothing. Good morning is not something you could say. No, I mean, I really don't have much to say. What don't you have what to say? Well, to tell you the truth, I don't want to talk to him. Did you tell him that? What? I should tell him I don't want to talk to you? That means I'm talking to him. That's what you're supposed to be doing. You're supposed to go over to a person and say, I don't want to talk to you. The person says, you're doing that right now. And he says, yeah, I'm doing it because I have to. Okay? Then the guy says, by the way, why don't you want to talk to me? So, what do you mean, why? It's already 2 weeks you took my parking space and you have no shame. It was your parking space. Oh my gosh. I'm so sorry. I didn't know. And then suddenly, oh my gosh, I have nothing what to say. Why didn't you know? Because I got something in the mail that said that the super is opening up a parking space. I just thought, what can I make it up to you? You see what happens when you talk why I can't talk with you? So you basically, this happens, this is not exaggerated at all. Not exaggerated at all. A first cousin suddenly seems to be a little bit distant. Okay? And you meet at a chasana, you meet at a wedding. Just not, yeah, hi Shifra, how you doing? Okay, and they walk away. Most of us just take it, you know. But you like Shifra, it's your first cousin. Shifra, well, what's wrong? Well, I'll tell you the truth. You made a chasana, or you know, you had a granddaughter. You didn't even tell me. You know, it's like I thought our friendship doesn't mean anything. We're family. I said, you never got the message? I called up. This, I'm telling you, happens so often. I sent it in the mail, and it came back with the wrong address. I just never sent it again. I'm sorry. You understand what changed? Speak to the person and tell the person, I don't want to talk to you. And then the person says, why don't you want to talk to me? And I have good reasons. Tell me the reasons. Write down the reasons. Tell a third person the reasons. Maybe there's another way to understand this. And this is amazing. Someone harms you emotionally. You don't have to forgive them if they don't ask forgiveness. But guess what happens now? You're obligated to go over to the person and say, I am not forgiving you because of what you did. And the guy just laughs, and you walk away, and guess what happened? You did not violate hating your brother in your heart. It's not in your heart anymore. It's in the open. No, that's not a joke. It's really brilliant, even from a mental, physiological way, but I'm saying it from a Torah perspective. This is what the Torah demands, that if someone hurts you, you don't have to forgive unless they ask forgiveness. And then, I'll go back to this, unless they ask forgiveness, but you're obligated to tell them that they hurt you. Or you have another very easy thing to do, and that is, don't get insulted. Or forgive them. You're not obligated to be insulted every single time. But if you are insulted, or you are hurt, or you were thinking of buying something, you know, and they bought it, and you really resent that because you have mentioned to them that you were thinking of buying this and this house, and then, you know, but you're working with the bank, and the guy you were just drinking coffee together, you know, you didn't promise, and then suddenly he took it, or he gave it to someone else. You get very upset. Fine, tell him. Or forgive him. But to register, this is wrong, I was hurt by so-and-so, and not to tell them, not only will you not be helped by this, you're actually doing a sin. Almost everyone that I know, starting from myself, always picks what we think is the easier thing. I just won't say anything. And it's really not good. I won't say anything unless you could say, I won't feel anything. If you could do that, you're a very healthy person. You have a strong ego, you have a strong identification of your own value, and in general, you're learning how to judge people appropriately. Give them the benefit of the doubt. But if you can't, then just saying, I won't say anything is not good. So even if you're by the wedding, and you're hugging and dancing with your first cousin Shifra, and in your heart there's a resentment, she didn't invite me, she didn't tell me why, you're not doing right. I hate to say the word that you're doing a sin, but you're certainly not doing right. And somewhere along the line, something will happen. It's far easier not to get insulted than to get insulted and then to have the strength to tell a person I was insulted. Because when you tell a person I was insulted, in many ways you're empowering that person. You're actually saying to that person, you know what? Your opinion means something to me. And that's terrible. I mean, you're such a big shot. Who's that person? Especially when it's funny, when you're more accomplished, and you have more money or better degrees or a nicer family, and why would I even be offended? Do I have such a fragile ego? No, I'm not going to say anything. I'll just make believe like it never. You want to make believe that it never happened, that's good. But make sure that you feel like it never happened. So now we're going to quickly summarize, okay? There are physical, healthy reasons why you should be a forgiving person. There are also practical hurt. You hurt yourself when you don't forgive. Physically. I'm not talking about spiritually. That's the first thing. The second thing is, it is the obligation of a Jew to try to imitate God. God is kind, we should be kind. God feeds the hungry, we should feed the hungry. God is a forgiver, we should learn to forgive, not because so-and-so deserves it, because I'm trying to be not an animal. God created me in His image. I don't know what that exactly means, but if I'm in His image, I should act like the way He would act. Which, P.S., footnote, this is just a footnote. The way we act towards one another is the way God acts towards us. And there's a teaching that says openly, and then there's the teaching that it casts a shadow over. The law, as I mentioned before, in chapter 606 of the Shulchan Aruch, says that when it comes Yom Kippur, God will forgive only the sins between man and God. Because it says, before your God you will be purified. What about the sins between man and man? God says, I cannot forgive that. You have to ask forgiveness. So here's a question. It's Yom Kippur, and you've offended a lot of people in your life, but you're willing to put up with it. You hear people saying, when I come to heaven, I'll defend my actions. But I did not daven, I didn't make blessings, I wasn't careful about this and that. God, please forgive me. Will God forgive you when you don't forgive man? We know God cannot forgive the sin that you did between man and man. How about, does that reflect on between you and God? According to many of the, if you do not forgive a fellow man, then God will not forgive you either. But even though it's between him and you. Are there any people you don't have to forgive? First one, tell you, the first one you don't forgive is when that person will take your forgiveness as an opportunity to hit you again. That's the first thing. So if you know that there's someone who's always undercutting you in business, he's always bad-mouthing you to the family. Every single time there's a family gathering, they love speaking about cousin Ari or what. And it calls you up before Yom Kippur or before a wedding or because dad is dying and you meet, please forgive me. And you know he's going to do this again. No, you don't have to forgive a person if forgiveness becomes part of the ammunition that hurts you. That's the first person you're not obligated. Can you forgive such a person? The answer is yes. But you're not obligated. You're not obligated to hurt yourself. A second person you're not obligated to forgive is someone who ruins your reputation. And when you think about it, it becomes really crazy because it includes a lot. But basically, someone spreads the word that you're not so honest. Someone spreads the word that you're not such a nice person, whatever it might be. And then comes over and says, I'm sorry. He says, I could forgive you, but what about all of the other people? Today, with the craziness of Instagram and Facebook and Twitter and email and instant communication, the whole world can know about this. You're not out. If someone ruins your reputation in some way or another, you're not obligated. And yet, it's good to forgive. But halachically speaking, no. What about the people that hurt you financially? The answer is that they have to pay you back. So if they took away, they broke your window, or they stole your customer, which is a question, whether or not you really can steal a customer. But somehow they caused you a financial loss, you could say to the person, I cannot forgive you until you pay me back. That's halachically okay. In fact, maybe makes a lot of sense. Once they pay you back, though, you should forgive if they ask for forgiveness. Where am I getting this type of information? The Gemara talks about if you cause a damage. God forbid you caused the damage and you broke someone's arm, and he couldn't show up to work for 6 weeks because he's in construction. Or even worse, you actually physically removed one of his limbs. You don't forgive a person like that. He caused you emotional damage and financial damage. He has to pay you. After he pays you, that's not enough. He has to ask forgiveness. If we wanted to translate this today, it would be like this. You're driving a car and you went into someone's whatever. I tell you what people do. Oh, the insurance will take care of it. Finished. If it's a fellow Jew, especially if it was somewhat deliberate, it's not that the insurance will take care of everything. You wronged a fellow Jew. You're obligated to ask forgiveness. So even when they get the settlement in the mail, you understand? You wrecked a car, and they're paying for the car. And say, well, so what? Now you still have to say, please forgive me, I didn't mean to hurt you in any way whatsoever. One more halacha, and then if there's any questions, I'll be happy to do it. One more halacha. You could only forgive if it's between you and that person. You can't forgive someone else's pain. We should never know of this, but it's unfortunate that some of the people that are closest to us hurt us the most. And they're the people that we have the most difficult learning how to forgive. Parents, siblings, whatever, children, whatever. So let's say, just for argument's sake, one brother gets into an argument with another brother, and it's very nasty. The father is really hurt. So the brother comes over to the father on Thanksgiving or Father's Day, and he says that, please forgive me for having caused you pain. The father can partially forgive, but he says, how can I forgive? I care about my other son. I can't forgive you for his pain. The only pain you could overlook, the only wound you could overlook is your pain, not someone else's. There's a famous book from Simon Wiesenthal, I think. I'll skip the whole thing. Over there, the story is about a Nazi who basically, before he dies, calls over a Jew, and he says, I feel regret, please forgive me. I can't meet my maker. And basically, the guy walks away. And amongst the people that he asked, that I do right, it's an amazing difference. Many of the Christians said, you should have forgiven him. Should have forgiven him. Yoshka forgave everyone. It's a Christian thing to do. And when he asked Jewish people, they said, what kind of stupid question is that? How can you forgive what he did to someone else? You can forgive what he did to you if he did it. You can't forgive him because what he did. And that's, to a certain extent, I know I'm opening up the box, I'm opening up the door, I'm not walking through it. Should we forgive Germany, for what happened? I'm just opening up the door. It's not up for us to forgive anything. It didn't happen to me. 6 million people were murdered. That they didn't murder me. I'm going to forgive them. They're not asking me forgiveness anyway, but even if they did. But I'm just letting you know that it becomes a very broad issue in terms of communities, in terms of countries and nations. So again, very important. You don't have to forgive. You should not forgive if it's going to hurt you. What does that mean, hurt you? The person is going to feel now emboldened. You see, he forgave me, now I can punch him again. The second thing is, if they ruined basically your reputation, you don't have to. But in both of these cases, it's still something you should consider seriously. The third thing is you never forgive for someone else. Okay. To recap, why is it so hard to forgive? Because it's hard to be like God. The only one who knows everything is God. So when I do something against my Creator, what am I going to say to God? I didn't mean it. He says, yes, you did. And no, someone was forcing me? No, not. He knows the before and after. And yet, who's the one that forgives? God. If God can forgive, then it becomes something that a person should try to aspire to. And remember, again, there's no commandment in the Torah to forgive, but there is a commandment to love. There's no commandment to forgive. There's a sin to hate. If you could somehow love a person and not hate a person and avoid forgiving the person, you're pretty remarkable. You're pretty remarkable. What do we hope and pray? That Hashem, who forgives us constantly, will forgive all of the negativity and bring healing to each and every one of us and bring the righteous Mashiach. Amen. Amen. Are there any questions or comments? Yeah.
It's using the concept of forgiveness. How does the first half of the bedtime prayer relate to the second half, right in the same one? Because
I'm glad you asked it. I haven't seen the second part of the bedtime Shema is, please forgive me for my sins.
And it's together with the.
And it's together with I forgive everyone. And it would seem to me, this I'm just suggesting, I don't know. It would seem to me because this actually sheds light on the first part. Why do I have to forgive others? It's because of what happened to me. It's actually my sins that brought it. So once I recognize that I am forgiving people because it's the right thing to do, i.e., I'm forgiving them because I really deserved it, then I'm really acknowledging that I'm not perfect. And please Hashem, take away my imperfection. It's also connected, of course, to the elevation of the soul in heaven. Okay.